You're on mute, Shavasti.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. I am Shravasti, Consulting Editor with Bengaluru Citizen Matters. I would like to take 2 minutes of your time to tell you about Citizen Matters. Citizen Matters is a civic media platform that serves as a knowledge exchange with insightful reports on critical urban issues, ideas, and solutions for cities, diving deep into issues which affect our quality of life, including water, commute, public safety, air quality, governance, education, environment, local economy, and more. We bring together civic media data and diverse voices to help citizens build sustainable, equitable, and livable cities. We provide in-depth information and insights on various critical urban issues to facilitate understanding and the tools for citizens to become change makers. Before I hand it over to Bhanu, our moderator for the evening, I would like to make some ground rules clear. First of all, those of you who are joining on the Zoom webinar, please feel free to add your questions and comments in the chat on Zoom. We will take it up during the course of the event. For those of you who are joining the YouTube live stream, please put your questions and comments in the chat box there. We will take it up during the course of the event. I would also like to request everyone to not indulge in any kind of abuse or personal attacks. With that, I hand over the session to Bhanu. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shravasti. Hello and good evening. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. I'm Bhanu. I'm a reporter with Citizen Matters. And today we're sort of continuing our ongoing coverage and reportage on lake development in Bangalore with a larger question that keeps coming up in our reporting, in our work, which is the lack of adequate transparency, adequate information in the public domain about what is happening to our lakes. So just to set briefly the context, and then I'll introduce our panelists. Lakes in Bangalore have historically been commons. There have been commons that is shared natural resources that, say, a village, for example, would come together to manage, maintain for various uses, whether it's fishing or livestock grazing, for example. And over the years, of course, we have moved away from exclusively using lakes for livelihood purposes or things like that. And today, as a city, we also tend to look at lakes as open spaces that are important to give us relief from the increasing concretization of Bangalore. We see it as places of recreation. We see it as places where we can engage with and interact with nature in a greater sense. And so we see it as community spaces where we can meet our friends, our neighbors, and have good conversations, have social gatherings, etc. So there are different ways in which, but the idea of using it as a common space is still there somewhere in the background. But what's happened is that what's missing is that the public has had very little to do, especially recently, with the management of lakes, or as the government or BBMP likes to put it, with the development of lakes. So from 2019, when H.D. Kumaraswamy was the chief minister briefly and introduced the budget, to 2022, when Basavaraj Bommai from BJP was the chief minister, in this period, where the government has sanctioned around close to 500 crores for development of over 60 lakes in the city. Yet we have no idea what exactly is happening. From around December last year, when the Urban Development Department of the state government sanctioned, basically gave the BBMP approval to start doing some development work across 67 lakes at the cost of around 200 crores. Several lakes in the city have been drained, dug up, desilted. Things are happening somewhere, fencing is happening somewhere. There is talk of desilting or sewage diversion. Yet people are not entirely sure exactly what is happening. And we have lots of people expressing concern. some from the perspective of biodiversity, some for sewage management, some saying that the lake areas are reducing, etc., etc. What the common thread that comes off is nobody knows exactly what's happening. And not too many people are really sure of how exactly to get this information. As somebody who goes to my neighborhood lake, if I see something, what do I do? Who do I call? How do I find out? How do I easily find out in this information age, find out what's happening to my lake? And that's something that is not easy anymore. So we're here to kind of talk about this. How do we bring back that sense of lakes being common? Is it just an issue of transparency from the government? Is it a lack of information on behalf of the public? Is the public not interested, perhaps? Is it that different groups have different interests and we're not all aligning towards a common goal? What are the issues that are there? We're going to talk about this with our very diverse panel today. And I'd like to welcome them all. Bijoy Venugopal is a bird watcher and founder editor of The Green Ogre. He's also a travel writer and a communications professional. Bijoy has been very actively speaking about how a neighborhood lake that he's very fond of, Solkere, should be developed in a biodiversity friendly way. Nirmala Gowda is the co-founder of Pani Earth, which is a citizen-led initiative to map the river basins and lakes that drain into it in 3 cities across Karnataka. And a lot of that work is happening around Bangalore, and it's really exciting work. So we will post links to their websites as well in the chat box. So please do check out their work. Ram Prasad is very well known among many people who are part of lake groups or lake WhatsApp groups. So you have a Facebook group anywhere in your neighborhood. You probably know of him. He's the co-founder of Friends of Lakes, and he's been a prolific voice talking about issues concerning our lakes. And when I call him, he says, "I'm just telling you the same thing I've been saying for 10 years." So he is probably going to repeat some of the stuff, but it's really important for us to hear and understand it. Saumya Gayakar, Saumya, can you come on camera? Is a member of the Yelahanka Puttanhalli Lake and Bird Conservation Trust. The Yelahanka Puttanhalli Lake is a very interesting example of a conservation reserve managed by the Forest Department. And the conservation trust that Soumya is part of, the trust actually was one of the petitioners who fought for the control of the lake to remain with the Forest Department and not be handed over to BBMP. And it's an interesting perspective. We'll talk to her about why they think one agency is better than the other, or if they do think that at all, and what are their experiences of working with different government agencies, as well as how they involve citizens in their work. So thank you so much, all of you, again for joining us. And I want to just get going. So I'll start with you, Ram. I want to know from you, as someone who's followed lake development and civic participation for so many years, for at least a decade now, can we talk about first, can you set the context for our audience about what does public participation mean in the context of lake development? What are we even talking about here? Is it, can you give us some context as to what you think it should be?
So I would like to give 2 contexts. One is the rural context and the urban context. I don't know how many rural people are saying this, or if there is anybody from the rural side, but I would like to give 2 contexts. First one is the rural context I would like, because that is very small. Because in rural sector, we do have people in the catchment area and the command area, and there is a good divide between both of them. People, those who are, because of whom the water is coming into the lake, and there are people who are going to use the lake. There is a lake user group, and there are farmers who want the water. There are fishermen who want the water, and the certain amount of water is for the cattle. So there, the dynamics of lake user group, what we call it as, is totally different. So we should look at that one also. We cannot just take that and put it into the urban set, because it will not work here. Because there it is totally based upon livelihood. If there is fights for water over there, so it is totally based on really on water. But now let us come to the urban side. The urban side, especially Bangalore, because of our imported water, there is least botheration about the water in the lake. So what happens is, many a times the water is totally ignored, is because for us, we are getting water from outside, that is imported water is coming to us. And because of the imported water that is coming to us, the local water is not given its due importance. Forget due importance, we don't give any importance to them, especially in areas where we are not even dependent on groundwater. So one of the things that we are seeing is that a lake in an urban context, especially Bangalore, is only for recreational and beautification purpose. So what is happening for us is that when we are trying to talk to people about anything else, the majority of citizens only understand, what they understand is my walking path, my gazebo, my yoga area, maybe even a basketball court, maybe a football area. So we have had people demanding, like we could, when we bring 1,000 people signature for telling that we want bird biodiversity, we talk about biodiversity, we have got another 5,000 coming and telling no, don't talk about all of those things, because snakes will start coming here. We don't want any snakes around my house. So let us do away with all those things. What we want is a proper concrete road on the sites, plus all the bund and all should be properly concretized and everything else, so that tomorrow there is no leak or anything else. Plus, end of the day, what they want to see is crystal clear swimming pool water. So that is where many imaginations are going around. If you see, last time the our UN's World Environmental Day, the thing was to reimagine and to restore. So if you are looking at like that, there is a need for reimagination of what a lake is in urban context, and that needs to go into the citizen. That it is true that the Bangalore lakes, Bangalore, all the lakes in Deccan Plateau, except very few numbers, most of the 99% of the lakes in Deccan Plateau are man-made. We cannot go away from that fact. But they were man-made for the reason for irrigation and drinking water. Yes, in urban context, there is no more irrigation, there is no more drinking water purpose. But at the same time, this very same lake is for flood mitigation. This very same lake is for groundwater recharge. This very same lake is a rainwater harvesting structure. That plays the very important role. And what we are seeing is, let it be rejuvenation, let it be the planning, even among citizens and people, general public. The problem is they are only looking at recreation, and maybe some of them are looking at sports. We are not telling, as Friends of Lakes, we don't tell that don't have lakes where recreation is there. But again, there has to be a balance. You cannot just go forward and make only recreation lakes and mess it up very badly. We need public participation, and for that public participation, we will need certain people to come in. I will slowly elaborate on all those kind of things. But presently, there is a need for reimagination as per the urban aspirations. But where is this urban aspiration end of the day going also is a very, very important part, because is the urban aspiration, the narrative is being taken away by a certain set of people who are just looking at recreation, who are just looking at maybe something else, and who are looking only the real estate value of the lake rather than the biodiversity value, environmental value, or those kind of values which are maybe 100 times more bigger than the real estate value of the lake.
Thank you. That's a really important perspective. And I think you've already addressed one of the core issues, which is that there is so many differences in what constitutes needs or wants from the public. What one group wants may not necessarily be the other. And that's something we're going to dig into a little more as we go along. But I want to first go through each of the panelists and bring in their perspective about their experiences first. So Nirmala, I want to turn to you, and you're part of a citizen-led initiative to map lake connectivity and to map river basins and their connectivity to lakes in places like Bangalore. You've also critiqued, when you were part of the Bangalore Environment Trust, you have also been part of a team that's critiqued, say, the Bengaluru Lake restoration effort, right? So all of this requires someone want to have access to data, to information, what is happening in order to be able to do. What is your experience of accessing this kind of data, and how important, as somebody who's now in the, I don't want to say business, but in the world of creating that information, what role do you see that playing in shaping public perception and sort of bringing us all together in one way towards lake development?
Thank you, Banu. Thank you, Ram Prasad, for that introduction on public participation. Sorry, there is going to be some background noise here. So I just want to kind of expand a little bit about Pani.Earth. We are a citizen think tank advocating on the rivers of Kaveri Basin. All districts of Kaveri Basin are in focus. Our first work has obviously started with Vrishabhavati and Arkavati River and Dakshina Pinakini River, and Bangalore is part of both Vrishabhavati and Arkavati and Dakshina Pinakini catchment. And we look at issues both from a lake perspective, and then we zoom out and look at from a river basin perspective. So the reason we've had to look at is, as part of Bangalore, trustee of Bangalore Environment Trust, our work started with Vrishabhavati River and Bairmangla Lake. Bairmangla Lake is a 1,000-odd acre lake in a rural setting. He mentioned rural and urban. I think it's very interesting. I can bring that concept out here. Bairmangla Lake, our work was completely in a rural setting. And then Bengaluru Lake, with which we were part of the NGT appointed technical committee, Bangalore Environment Trust, Dr. Yellappa Reddy, and us, all of us were attending the technical committee meetings. That Bengaluru is a completely urban lake. So there's a rural characteristic and there is an urban characteristic. And we also have a public interest litigation on pollution and restoration, unscientific restoration of Bairmangla Lake in High Court of Karnataka. And it's the High Court of Karnataka, when Justice Oka was there, he had issued a stay order on the works, and that was in 2020, and the stay order still exists as of today. So it is from in Bairmangla, the use of the lake is for irrigation, right? The wastewater of Bangalore, Vrishabhavati catchment in Bangalore, so some of the lakes in the Vrishabhavati catchment is the Hoskerehalli Lake, Mailasandra Lake, Malatali Lake, are some of the well-known lakes. From this catchment of the BBMP, much of the wastewater enters Vrishabhavati, it enters Bairmangla Lake. And Bairmangla Lake at one point had, in the 1970s, 80s, had a thriving fisheries. The water was used for irrigation. That's basically an irrigation dam. Water was used for irrigation, but since 1980s, 2000, the waters became so polluted that in 2000, the government stopped collecting cess from the farmers for use of water because it was so polluted. The waste water from Bangalore was had completely taken over the reservoir. So in 2000 is where we have the cess receipts from the farmers, which shows that the government stopped collecting the cess. And the vegetables, the greens, the corn that's grown from the wastewater in Bairmangla comes back to the Bangalore market, Saraki market and beyond here. And I use the word wastewater and not sewage very deliberately. Wastewater is a combination of industrial effluents, disintegrating, leaching solid waste, and sewage as well. It is a wrong narrative to put out there to say this is sewage, because Bangalore is an industrial town. We are known for our services industry, but it is an industrial town. We have Peenya at the center. We have Kumbalgodu. We have Whitefield industrial area. Bengaluru has many assorted, varied industries which we have mapped in our Bengaluru-Vartur catchment map. So it is an industrial town, and we have to acknowledge the fact that the wastewater that is flowing in our streams, which we now call as drains, is actually a combination of all of these elements. So now the water from Bangalore in a rural setting is being used for agriculture, like Ram Prasad said, in the case of Bayarmangala. And in that, the farmers are not organized. There is no water users association in there, which was surprising for us. And they were not paying any cess. So if you were paying a cess, then there would be a water users association. But since for wastewater, who has the right to wastewater is something that's not been determined. And so the users were not, the farmers were using the wastewater, were, since they were not paying the cess, were not organized. When they did start the rejuvenation of work of Bayramangala, it was the politicians, the local MLAs who came to the farmers and said, the water is very polluted, you know, we're just going to restore it. What information they didn't give to the farmers at that point in time was that the Vrishabhavati water, which is the water that enters Bayramangala, would in fact be diverted via a 6 kilometer long, 3.5 meter wide diversion channel, meaning the water that's coming in is going to bypass the lake and go downstream of the lake, that is the Vrishabhavati river. So what this essentially does is, for the duration of the restoration of the Bayramangala lake, the farmers whose livelihood is dependent on the wastewater will not have water for agriculture. So their sustenance is in question. This is the information that the farmers were not given. And it was a huge challenge for us to get the DPR, detailed project report, from the government. In this case, the custodian of the lake was Minor Irrigation, and the government entity that was executing the project was Kaveri Niravari Nigama Limited, right? So both of them were involved. We ran pillar to post to even get detailed project report. We were able to get the detailed project report finally via RTI. We took that to the farmers. We used to go to every Gram Panchayati, get the farmers and the women together and actually show the DPR, translate it to Kannada and say, what are the implications of these restoration projects? And that's how we were able to gather over a period of 2 years, significant farmer support to file a public interest litigation in High Court. And the very first time the diversion happened, all the farmers were there on the lake bed, attacking the government officials for diverting without letting them know, because they had standing crops that were that they lost, that they were not told. So this is the kind of opaqueness that we see when lake restoration happens in the rural area, right? Now let's come to the urban area, which is Belandur. Belandur, because of Dr. Yellapareddy and Yellapareddy being in the technical committee, we were also part of the technical committee. And the DPR did not exist at that point, as we were discussing. And I think Ram Prasad and several of the other lake activists also, there were several public hearings. I think there were 2 or 3 public hearings. And in much of the public hearings, what we were seeing was that what was happening inside the technical committee was very different from what was happening outside of the technical committee. And unfortunately for us, we also saw that the scientific experts who were speaking outside in the public forum said exactly the opposite inside in the technical committee. So it was for us as citizens a very shocking experience, I would say. How can the experts refute their own research inside a technical committee and side with the government, whereas in the public forum with the citizens and in the media, it's a completely different picture. And it was during the Belandur technical committee meeting is when we realized that there is no proper, because Belandur, as per the order, it is you're not only looking at the Belandur lake, the NGT order was very clear in saying you look at the whole catchment, you have to address this at a catchment level. So then we were like, okay, what's in the catchment? What are the lakes in the catchment? What lakes feeds into what lakes? What are the stressors of these water bodies? How do we analyze and get that information out? The government and the technical committee was just not interested in it. So it was a hand-drawn map that we from BET kind of drew took the information from the web, which was available, Google Earth, brought all those things and our ground truthing exercises and said, okay, these are the lakes that eventually drain into Belandur. These are the kind of stresses that we are looking at. And these are the places where the STPs are. And now let's look at how the solution needs to be. So it was actually a hand-drawn map that was used for discussion in our technical committee meetings. And that's these meetings is the learnings from these meetings, both in Bairmangla also the same situation. Even in Bairmangla with Lokayukta, the High Court, we actually had a hand-drawn map of the catchment itself to show how the upstream lakes and upstream hydrology and the stresses upstream actually impact the lake and the river. And all of these actually led to the founding of Pani.Earth today, because we didn't want people to be keep struggling to get basic information which should be readily available, and so we could leapfrog to a different level of solutions, right? With Bairmangla also, despite being in the technical committee, despite Santosh Hegde heading it, it was still very hard for us to get information. So the DPRs were not written. There were 2-3 contractors who came in and presented the DPRs, and they were not written with any scientific rigor at all. The same thing with the Bairmangla also. It was not written with scientific rigor. It was a civil engineering solution. And in the whole process, just to kind of, where the strong expert opinions come in, where the strong citizen participation happens and how we bring it together, there was nobody in the government department to anchor it. There was the attitude of the government itself who is non-existent in terms of let's allow the citizens in and let's allow the experts in and let's see how we can build a consensus around it. And for us, we were taking a view that was quite different from the citizens as well. We were taking a view that was quite different from the government as well, because what we were looking at was the scientific data, and our core work is on pollution. And from a pollution perspective, from a heavy metal perspective, the solutions that was presented by the contractor and the government at that point was not making sense to us. That's where, in terms of Bengaluru Lake, which at that point was under the jurisdiction of BDA, and despite under the scanner of NGT, despite the scanner of the citizens, because Bengaluru burning is a global, was and is still a global issue in terms of it represents what Bangalore is. The lake burning represents what Bangalore is today. So it's still unresolved, and we did get our hands on the DPR for Bengaluru, and we could not make head or tail of it. Very, very badly written document, and the silt is being transferred, and we've been submitting RTI to kind of understand what are you spending the money that was allocated for lake restoration on, and there is no really clarity on how much money has been spent for what. I do want to make a comment on the diversion of the diversion aspect of the lake, but I think I've taken too much time.
We'll come back to that if we have time, because we should give others a chance as well. But thank you, Nirmala. What you've done is very lucidly outline how, when you do try to find out what's happening in a rural or urban setting, the situation of how you're stonewalled when you look for information, and how that means that there is no way to create consensus, which is, I think, very important. Create consensus between citizens and what, say, the scientists think are right, or what the government thinks is right, for a sort of for a shared natural resource. So I'll ask, sort of in a related sense, I will move on to Bijoy. And Bijoy, over the years, I know that you, at least at least from our interactions, you've come at this from a biodiversity perspective. You've looked at lakes as places that should harbor and should protect biodiversity. And I think over the years, we've got a reasonably good idea of how a lake should be in order to preserve biodiversity. The range of experts who've talked about the matter, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that certain shapes, certain sizes, certain ways of managing lakes will harbor biodiversity, especially bird diversity. But so one thing, very briefly, I would ask you to talk about what are your concerns about the lake development in the city from a biodiversity perspective, what you have noticed as a naturalist, as a bird watcher, as someone who actively takes citizens out for bird walks to interact with nature much more, right? And also in that same way, like if sort of alluding to what Nirmala also sort of brought up and Ram also brought up, which is different people have different interests, different people have different ways of looking at what a lake should be. So have you experienced that as well in your personal interactions?
First off, thank you, Bhanu, and thank you, Citizen Matters, for having me on a panel that is otherwise, so esteemed. I mean, I've seen and heard of the work that others in this panel have done. I mean, for a long time, I've seen and admired the work that Mr. Ramprasad has done, Nirmala and Soumya as well. I mean, this has been in the background for me a long time. And I have been guilty, I must say, as Ram pointed out earlier, of approaching this from a recreation perspective at first. And I didn't go deeper for a long time. And when I eventually did, it was circumstances, I must say, that forced me from being more than just a bird watcher to one who was interested in the other aspects. And I was content for a long time to skim the surface and look at it more as look at lakes more as destinations for leisure. But in 2020, I started with, I was part of a lake survey that was done along with BNG Birds and ESG and several others. So early 2020, we surveyed about 30 lakes around the city. And our job at that point, I was tasked with leading a small group that went to multiple lakes. And at that point, it came to my attention that we were looking at a larger problem. We were looking at a problem where, of course, our core job was to document the biodiversity there, birds and other biodiversity. But we also made note extensively of the other problems that pervaded these lakes. So, for instance, we noticed that many of them were constructed like soup bowls, which means the stone pitching on the side was narrow without any foreshore. So a part of our orientation was to understand what should be the ideal wetland, and a wetland, of course, being commons and not fenced and not cut off to the general public. Also, what other biodiversity, what other species apart from humans use the lake? So besides, of course, various strata of humans and citizens who use the lake. So this was very revealing in a sense. And thereafter, I think I started looking at the problem very differently. Till then, I was just in and out on convenience. And especially close to my place, and the pandemic especially opened my eyes to this a lot more, because due to the travel restrictions that, travel was limited during that time. And I started to go to Saulkere, which is close to my place. And over time, as a bird watcher, and I made an extensive documentation of the birds there, and about 205 species of the lake, of which I have personally documented about 170. And having led walks, I started to understand multiple perspectives. And also, we got involved with groups that are working to protect and to conserve lakes and manage them as well. I don't want to say protect and conserve. These are loose phrases, but mostly it's manage the lakes in these areas. And there are organizations that are working for the conservation of local lakes, and we've been working with them to bring this perspective of biodiversity into the conversation. And especially, I think we've seen also the problems of raw sewage inflow, and most of us in Bengaluru area were victims of the flooding that took place in September. I am myself one of those victims. I had to move out of my apartment for a week, and we saw at that point the impact of all the encroachment that has happened, and everything that has, all the conversations that were so far, just news headlines, became something very close to our lives at that point. And so therefore, when plans were announced earlier this year, or late December last year, to we came across a flex banner just outside Saulkere announcing that the lake will be beautified and redeveloped, and that rang a lot of alarm bells. And when we looked further, worked and started talking to MAPSAS, the group that manages these local lakes, we understood that there is no real conversation happening between the administrative bodies and the citizens. And there is no transparency of information. Now, it is, for instance, there are groups of citizens interacting perhaps with the administrative bodies, but there is, and of course, BBMP, as most of us know, has not even had an election in the last few years. So it's unclear who the officials are, in the sense, unless you are connected to some back channel, you don't know who's responsible for what. And we've seen the systematic destruction, and I'd like to say that in unequivocal terms, that it has been a systematic destruction of these public commons. And with allowing raw sewage to flow in, allowing lakes to become festering pools, eutrophic pools, this is just, and a lot of citizens are not aware of it. And a lot of the work that we've done as bird watchers and on nature walks, etc., is to try and educate people about this aspect as well. That, and birds for us, from this perspective alone, are an indicator. They're a bioindicator of the health of the environment. And we have been trying to take that approach to look at, what kind of habitats, what kind of microhabitats a lake must support. And it's been quite illuminating to understand that the lake is not just that body of shimmering water. It is also the vegetation that surrounds it. It is what plant life lives in that water. What other creatures the water supports naturally. I mean, what native fish, what crustaceans, etc. And that entire web of life has been quite fascinating for us to understand. And also, in parallel, it brings to our notice and our attention that this web of life is extremely fragile. If and more citizens don't understand this, we are at a loss, and we have something to lose collectively. So our perspective, my perspective as a naturalist, and I'm not alone here, I represent many others, and I speak for them when I say this, is that the more people understand that this is not, lakes are not, of course, for recreation alone. They are for recreation, but not for recreation alone. That they are part, we talk of green lungs a lot, and everyone wants to go and plant trees. We hear this a lot. On one recent discussion in one of our lake groups, there were some citizens who were enthusiastic about planting mango saplings all over the lake. While we see that enthusiasm, it's important to kind of steer it towards a more balanced outcome. So there is enthusiasm, but I think it needs to be channeled. But more than anything, I think from an administrator's perspective, the BBMP or whoever's in charge, it's not very clear who manages this, and we have to really dig hard for information. This information, I believe, needs to be forthcoming and should be available to citizens more easily. For instance, if there is 200 crore allotted for the development of lakes, how is it going to be spent? And what are the milestones for this development? This is currently unavailable. So even if it is available, it's probably available very deep down a rabbit hole that most citizens won't go to and find out. And keeping this opaque works to the advantage of some vested interests. And that is something that has been very disturbing. And while the more we work with groups, we are realizing that there is a lack of accountability on the part of the administrative bodies. And there is also an assumption that talking to some citizens groups is equal to talking to citizens. So, and at the same time, I will not. I think I'll be unfair if I do not point the finger at citizens like us too, who are not making enough effort to go and find out these things for our own. Many people visit the lake, but for their leisure activities. But it takes a lot of pushing to get through to them that this is more than, I mean, they want someone else to do the work. And I think that perspective also has to change. We as a people like to be governed a lot, and we like to just outsource it. If we could Swiggy it, we would Swiggy it, but we can't do that. But so that kind of, I think the mentality also has to shift. And yeah, I've taken a bit of time, but I think I hope I've answered the question that you asked.
Yeah, thanks. So I think one of the things you brought up, which is very important, is that yes, the government may say that we've talked to certain citizen groups, so we've talked to citizens, and that may not be the same thing as talking to everybody. But at the same time, it's also a challenge to get greater participation from citizens or the public in the process. And a lot of citizen groups, I think, do struggle with that. So something that we should also get into if we can. But I will move on to Soumya, and here again, I think your perspective here on this point will be really valuable, Soumya, because you've been a part of a trust that has been sort of monitoring and watching out for the Yelahanka-Puttenhalli Lake, and you actively petitioned and sort of advocated for the control of the lake, the management of the lake to remain with the Forest Department over BBMP. And one very briefly, I'll request you again very briefly so that we can move on to other things. How it would be nice to know why you felt that was important. And secondly, as a lake, again, as a group, as an organization that is looking after monitoring a lake or sort of watching out for one lake, how do you try to get citizens involved, or do you find that there is it is a challenge to do that, to get a larger public participation in whatever you are doing?
Yeah, hi. Thanks a lot, Banu. Yeah, it's a very relevant question, actually. And the first question being why we thought it was necessary to move from BBMP to back to the Forest Department is because we felt that since we had already interacted with the Forest Department earlier, and the lake was under the custodianship of the Forest Department for quite some time, and we had seen what was happening around with all the other lakes that were under BBMP, and we felt the BBMP, maybe their intentions are right, but the approach that both the government institutes took towards the same intention was different. So we felt that while BBMP was more people-centric, the Forest Department was more nature-centric, and they kind of understood what needs to be done when it comes to conservation of a space. So that was one reason why we thought of fighting this and moving it back to the Forest Department. But another thing that reinforced this thought was the very first week when the BBMP took over from the Forest Department, we saw that they brought in children's play area equipment, gym equipment, and some all these paver blocks and things like that, and then those alarm bells just kept going off in all of us. And then we realized we had to do something, and thankfully we have a good set of team where each one is, a few of us are well versed with the legal route and things like that. So we kind of went forward and fought this and brought it back to the Forest Department. So that was the thought process behind it. And I feel we have been pretty happy with the way things have gone ever since that, because the Forest Department has been more open to suggestions, and they kind of take in what we have to say about how to go about it as well. Because even for them, they are more concerned, or they have more experience with larger reserves and wildlife conservation areas rather than urban settings. So they are open to suggestions, and they have in fact created a lake management committee in which they call us for meetings to understand what we have in mind, and in case they feel that something is not possible, then they try to explain it to us. So that is one thing I've seen is very different from what we have seen with the BBMP. And regarding the citizen participation and the transparency to the citizens, I would say, yes, there is still a little bit lacking there, but I don't see it as that big of a issue for us being under the forest department, because like I said, there is a management committee which decides what the budget for this year is going to be and what it is that they're going to be spending on. So we have some bit of clarity, but also the opaqueness, like you said, comes from these quick solutions, to issues that they have that happens on the spur. And, sometimes maybe there is a stormwater drain clogged somewhere. And so they, to diffuse that situation, they immediately want a solution, and the immediate idea would be to leave it to the lake. Those kind of situations arise, and at that point, yes, we do not know, but I don't think we can really blame them for that, because they're also going along with what can be done at that point, I guess. But there could be a little more transparency in this whole process. And regarding the citizen participation, yes, we have seen a lot of citizen participation with our lake, at least, and we've been very fortunate that we have a huge community of over 300, 400 people who are regularly participating in the activities of the lake. And there are different types of people. You have people who are just coming for a walk. You have people who come and watch and learn. You have students who come in there for their research and understanding. And you have naturalists and birders who come in there on weekend mornings for their photography. So you have different types of people, and somehow we have tried to bring them all together with, a united kind of goal to conserve that beautiful space. So I think we've been lucky in all ways in that matter. Yeah. So any other question that I left out? I'm sorry, there were 3 questions. So you're muted.
I'll come back to you. I think
sure.
you've done a really excellent job of explaining. The one thing that you said, and I think that's again something I think all of you would have experienced. All of us, anytime we deal with government officials, there is a lot of variation. There are going to be officials who will be sympathetic, who will tell you what is happening, give you the documents. Even as a reporter, I see that often. And there are going to be officers who say, no, absolutely not. There are going to be, there's a lot of variation both in how much transparency there is, even within an agency. And of course, as you, in your experience between, say, the Forest Department and BBMP. But also, there is a lot of variation and there's a lot of confusion here about who holds the power, something Bijoy also brought up. I think that is it the BBMP engineer whose name is on a document, or the is on a DPR, or who comes up there and actually does the public facing interaction and talks to people, or is it the MLA of the area, for example? Because especially now with the run up to elections, we saw a lot of MLAs from different parties were jumping on the lake development bandwagon, right? They all took credit for different lakes in their constituencies. So one is, I think it would be really useful, Ram, if you could come in here, for example, with your experience of this interaction, this variation. Does it, is it good that at least there are some officers that are there, and so we can, sometimes go to somebody, or is it actually a problem, because basically there are some crumbs thrown in the direction of the public and we're sort of kept appeased in a way? Is there something larger that needs to change and change quickly, maybe? What is your experience of dealing with government officials? Do you see a lot of constraints there, and do you say place the blame on political leaders entirely, for example?
So let us take up the little bit of history
Yeah.
of
I just 1 second interrupt you, and I want to say that I've brought in Ram, but if any of you have anything to say, add to this, or you want to agree, disagree with him at any point, please just let me know, and I'll bring you guys in as well. Yeah, please.
to give you a small history of especially Bangalore Lakes. I will now onwards I'll stick only to mainly to Bangalore Lakes,
Yeah.
and more towards all the four pillars that what we call it as the judiciary, the bureaucracy, and the political wing, and the the citizen and journalist. I put them together in this whole thing. So taking all these four pillars, have we four pillars given them reports and made that one? Yes. Let us take the first report, which is 1986 report by Lakshman Rao committee. There was a report how lakes should be rejuvenated, how many lakes are there, what are the lakes different that are there, and all those. That one big report was in 1986. This was presented, and end of the day, nothing happened. So again, another report comes out known as A.T. Ramaswamy report, with mainly regarding to the encroachment of the lake and how much lakes are encroached and all those kind of things. Then comes the next report, what comes out. So you take it as one was this thing expert kind of a report. Expert means, I mean, is more towards IFS officers and those kind of people want to know at least a little bit of environment, a little bit of ecology and all those kind of it. That's Lakshman Rao committee. Then total another kind of report, which is more of a revenue kind of a report, that is I.T. Ramaswamy report. Then after that comes the 2012 High Court order plus the N.K. Patil report, which is Justice N.K. Patil report, which is more, I would call it as a judiciary report. That judiciary also jumped into this, and because of a court case by ESG, they also jumped into it, and they also gave a, there was a report generated, and that was given. Then 2015 comes the EMPRI report, and EMPRI report is still not tabled. Then in between 2014-15 again comes the Koliwada committee report, which is totally a political report. That is Koliwada, and from Congress, from Janata Dal it was Kumaraswamy, and from BJP it was Suresh. They all sit together and they make another report known as the Koliwada committee report. Now, after all these things, again, court has gone ahead and asked Neri for another report. So with this many reports and court orders, you can imagine 2012 court order. So in 2022, we just had a death ceremony, or what we call it as the Matam. We did, we all sat together, and even N.K. Patil had come, and even the Karnataka Pollution Control Board had come, and everybody stated that we can't do anything about this. I have given an order, and there is two contempts. 2015 there is one contempt, and 2020 and 21 there is another contempt also. In spite of the contempt, they all tell they are very useless. With responsibility, I'm telling this word, that the judiciary tells they are useless, the bureaucracy tells they are useless, the politician tells they are useless. Then who is useful here? I'm surely not understanding this whole thing. That everybody told in that meeting, it is a recorded meeting, it is there available. And everybody tells that, we could not do, and still now we have not been able to implement an High Court order of 2012. So you can imagine citizen participation in this. So we all have been trying to do this from decades and decades together. And what is happening is, first of all, many politicians are very happy that as groups also, we differ with each other, we fight with each other, and unity is not there. And because of that also, they're very happy about it. And the problem is that when we try to show unity, every time, let it be the bureaucracy, let it be the political wing, comes and sees to it that, as you told, few crumbs are thrown, the group becomes happy and then walks out. And what happens is, the citizen lake groups, especially, after a certain time, only is running behind name, fame, glory. Forget about whether they know about the lake, they know about anything, that gives a damn to them. Now, what is needed is only name, fame, glory. How many, this thing that we are doing, how much of money See, one more thing is, maintaining a lake is not an easy thing to do. And every time for me, it was told, when I was trying to get into this lake issues and other things, Ram, you need to put up an organization. It has to be this much money will be spent. No, we never. Friends of Lake is not even a registered organization. We don't even have a rupee in our hand. But we are the biggest lake group presently. That much we know very well. So what we need is a real intent to do certain things. Instead of thinking that, no, there is no money, I cannot come and do anything. No, there should be that, there should be. No, we don't have to. Every citizen has the right to get in, and then to organize and to take help from different people, their own colleagues, and then try to save the lake. Because end of the day, what happens is, every time what is happening is that whenever we try to put all these things together, who is creating the havoc for us? The people, those who are benefiting from the lake being what it is. That is to destroy the lake and maybe make it into a real estate tomorrow, or else to see to it that, there is huge amount of sewage flowing, and at last the people themselves go and tell, we don't even want this lake. And this has happened. Taking all those few, they have closed lakes also. Not in, at least in Bangalore, after a certain time, I think so from past 15 years, we have not allowed that. But remember, the Malaria Act is still active. Malaria Act simply tells that if there is cases of malaria within the area, then the low-lying areas in that one is the duty of the collector to close the low-lying areas and to see to it that you make it take it for developmental purposes. We can go and look at the KPTC Act. It is still there. Karnataka Town Planning Act, it is still there. So that can be used anytime, telling that no. And we do have people want to jump off, telling that no, see, this is the lake is bad. Who is responsible for the lake being bad? Today, it is the citizen themselves. First, the reason that we want citizens to be actively participating, many of them don't do participatory governance at all. For them, it is only a complaining zone. Every time they want a complaint forum. Whether redressal is happening also, I don't know whether they are really bothered about it. But what they want is a complaint forum. And they want to keep on complaining. And maybe in that one, if I'm able to get some name, fame, glory, even that is also very good for us. So we first of all have to see that it is not my name, fame, glory, or not organization name, fame, glory, but tomorrow it is nature, it is biodiversity that has to be saved. It is the lake that has to be saved. So in that purpose, inclusivity, and if there are DPRs being made, then the DPR, very, very simple thing, KTCDA. Okay, now to tell you how the hierarchy goes and how the whole thing works, maybe many of them don't know. Just, if it is a rural lake, there's a different kind of hierarchy. Why I'm talking about little bit about rural lake is most of the lakes now, which are getting rejuvenated in the peri-urban areas, that is, let it be Anekal, let it be Ramnagara, let it be Devnalli, let it be Kanakapura, this areas, which are also affecting Bangalore equally, all these lakes are being rejuvenated even without a DPR. If Nirmala remembers very well, in one of the public meetings, some of us voiced it, telling that if they told that NGT has the extreme power, full power to order the lake rejuvenation, and they don't need a DPR for the lake rejuvenation. But that is not the law of the land. The law of the land is very clear. KTCDA, there is something known as Karnataka Tank Conservation and Development Authority. You need their full approval to do any lake rejuvenation in the state of Karnataka. And that approval means it is for everybody. It is for the minister. It is for the chief minister also. They will have to go through the procedure of the technical approval committee and take the technical approval. Here is another crux. Whether the technical committee has got any ecologist? No. Hydrogeologist? No. Environmentalist? No. An environmental engineer? No. Limnologist? No. Toxicologist? No. Nobody there, only civil engineers. So obviously you will get only civil engineering drawings. If you see some of our articles that we have been writing from past, this fight has been there from 2014 is what I'm fighting, telling that we need to reconstitute the technical approval committee with all the other experts also being in there, so that all the aspects of lake rejuvenation can be seen into. But no, that is huge. And here again, I'm telling you, each group has got its own agendas. So they will do as per their agendas and other things, whatever they want to do. Why I'm telling you this one is, when we are fighting for the Malatali lake also, there was a different group which told very clearly to us, get lost from here. We want 4 tracks, 1 jogging track, 1 walking track, another one cycling track, another one rail track also. That was taking up practically half of the lake. And we had to, somebody else had to come and put a court case until then, the whole problem. But there were groups which went on the other side. So there is a need for huge amount of education now, and the reconstitution of the approval, that is the technical approval committee, which is there in KTCDA, and let it be anybody. The rules have to be followed. It can be even, why I'm telling openly is that many of the Mahadevapura lakes, which were rejuvenated, which are getting rejuvenated now recently, let it be Bengaluru, let it be Chikkabalamburu, let it be, on the other side, Kodati or other lakes also, no DPR. When we asked for in RTI, they told no, there is no DPR. KTCDA tells there is no DPR. So rejuvenations are happening without DPR, and the rejuvenations are being done by NGOs through CSR funds. Let this, in this webinar, I'm giving a very strict warning to any company, any NGO, without a DPR, if you are doing lake rejuvenation. And if something technically goes wrong there, and tomorrow, if there is a flooding happening there, very, very simple, that you will be culpable homicide. And I will make sure that the criminal case is filed against the NGO, against the company, and against all the authorities who are involved in lake rejuvenation without a DPR.
Right. Well, I understand where your anger and frustration is coming from. It's from having seen this go on for several years. But one of the things you have pointed out clearly, there is among at least a large group of the public, there is very little understanding of issue of, say, the idea of biodiversity or of lakes being natural spaces, right? I'm sure all of you have come across this, and I understand the frustration that somebody wants 4 walking tracks, but from their perspective, they might see this as a way to get out and have a recreation space that otherwise the government has not provided for them. So how do we then get on the ground and communicate? Say, for example, Bijoy, if you can tell us, how do you go about telling people, hey, the snakes that are roaming around the lake or the frogs are not a bad thing, that it's not bad to have some shallow areas because it's not bad to have some of those birds, or it's not bad to have a bird in a tree because, I've heard complaints from people that they don't like birds because they
because birds sit in trees. Yeah, okay. Yeah, actually, we have to as well. It's not the entry. What can I say? The entrances to these conversations are always, you have to look for the curiosity, and sometimes it's hard to permeate. But I would say that, the last few years have made me very optimistic about, the fact that there is a core to every citizen that actually has, veers towards an appreciation of nature. And this has been one belief that drives me forward. I'd say that needs to be awakened in people, and people do observe if you show them. And the walks that, especially, we've been conducting some walks in East Bangalore. It started very late. We planned to have them just before the pandemic. The pandemic put pay to our plans. But in 22, we started these walks. And of course, under the aegis of BNG Birds, we were able to bring a lot of people to the lakes of East Bangalore, especially Savalkere and Kaikondalli and Kasvanalli and lakes like that, which are in this region. And these are visited by birds, and birders. But mostly what happens is when these walks bring together people who are completely new to this. They must have heard about this walk from someone, from 6 degrees of separation. And when they come along on these walks, it opens their eyes. And fortunately for us, on these walks, we are usually joined by people who have considerable experience in other aspects of biodiversity. And that's a very enriching. And we see more and more children joining us on these walks, and everyone picks up a camera these days. And I don't have too much of a quarrel with that, because it's a way of seeing. But it does stoke questions, and those questions are an entry point to understanding why a bird is in a tree and why that tree is there, and what lets that tree grow, and what is the advantage in letting that tree stand there and not. And sometimes the pain I sense in people's responses when a tree is chopped or when water is polluted. I know that while that moment may be one of grief, it is a pathway to appreciation. It's a pathway to understanding more. And I have a lot of faith that our younger, nature enthusiasts will ask for something more. I just hope we are able to leave something in a form that they can reclaim.
Right. Okay. Nirmala, please. What do you wanted to come in? You're on mute.
Yes, yes. I wanted to kind of continue on the line of what Ram Prasad was talking about in the earlier question that you had. It has been our experience working with both Bengaluru and Bairmangala. There is a significant political interference at the MLA level. We were threatened and attacked physically by the corresponding MLAs in Bairmangala several times, and we were threatened in the Bengaluru case as well, firsthand by the MLA himself. Right? So there's a significant political interference at the MLA level. Perhaps, I think for us, what we see is that, when the civil engineering contracts are given, there is this certain 40% that needs to go. And that interference happens with the lake development works, very much so. Especially in the case of Bairmangala, it is a 110 crore project. And in the case of Bengaluru, it was about 450 or 500 crores rejuvenation. That was a cost that was put to it. Then there's the political interference on one part. Then I would also like to look at the executive. There's no executive justice. Unfortunately, the government, most of them are very docile and passive to the political interference. They are just the S-man sitting there, and it's the political interference that, gets above the executive one. So there's no executive justice, there's no political justice here. Then you come to the scientific establishment. Again, the scientific establishment also is very passive and docile, and the political interference takes over that part of the system also. So then we are not looking at scientific justice either. Then comes the judiciary. The judicial justice is kind of our ray of hope, I think, for most of us. When we run pillar to post, we see that there's really nothing happening here. And then we finally seek judicial intervention, and that is our ray of hope. But lately, that also has not turned out. Judicial justice also is sort of beyond the citizens' reach at this point, it seems to me. And then comes the citizens themselves, the citizen justice. It's really heartwarming to see Biju explain, this is how I was, and, there's a transformation in thinking. That kind of transformation does not happen for all citizens. And then to see Soumya, very competently navigate the legal route and to be able to very, in a very disciplined manner, do this, because we know, going to court, how much time, effort, discipline, knowledge it takes to do this. And it's commendable what Biju and Soumya are doing. And it's exactly those kind of citizens that we need on the ground. And then comes the media. Media does not, unfortunately, do a good job of bringing right information, scientific information, accurate information to the public at all. And that's the reason for us to also found Pani.Earth, is that we see this docileness, we see this passivity out there, and misinformation out there. And especially in the rural areas, it's what the politicians say is the law of the land. There is no other law out there in Kanakpura or Ramnagar districts. Now, if you come to the Bengaluru urban, it's only the elite who understand the scientific aspect of it, who actually take the trouble to go a step further and understand the mechanics of this and connect the dots for themselves. Generally, the citizens also, because of all of these reasons that I explained, are unable to comprehend the ecology, unable to comprehend the environment, and there is a certain learning and transformation that has to happen at the citizen level as well. It is for the citizens to, when you say about jogging paths, the gym area, one of the reasons also is that within the cities, we don't have parks, right? So in some ways, there is a jostling happening for the very little space that is the lakes to transform them to parks as well. So that sympathy and empathy is there. I can understand the citizens' perspective there. But then also, as from a water perspective, from a wildlife perspective, from a lake perspective, I think we need to stand firm and say, this is not the space for that. These lakes are not meant for jogging paths and water and gym. And we need to kind of be able to think beyond ourselves at that point in time, right? Is something that I would want to say. And going back to the situation of floods that Ram Prasad was mentioning, and we have brought this angle out as part of our Bengaluru catchment map and analysis data that we've got. There is no hydrological understanding of an hydrological capacity of the catchment, right? So much of the lakes, there is diversions happening, as in the diversion meaning the water that's coming into the lake is bypassed, so it goes to the downstream stream or river or lake. When that bypass happens, when there is rains, how that bypass water which goes downstream impacts the communities there is not thought of. It's not part of your DPR, or it's not part of the thinking process itself. So the latest one we
about this a few years back in the Bairamangala context, right? You called it NIMBYism. You were referring to the
yes,
yeah.
Not in my bag.
Yeah, I have shared a link to that story, by that article by Nirmala in the chat. So if I request everybody to take a look, because it's a really interesting, hard-hitting piece that explains what happens when you don't think of the hydrological flow, what happens when you only work on the lake in your backyard, or you only work on one aspect and you don't look at what happens upstream or downstream of that. But I will cut you off here for a second, because I want to also get Samya in. One thing you brought up that we need a sense of empathy for people who want different things, because sometimes it comes from a place of need. Another thing Ram brought up, that different people have different requirements, and so different groups come up with their own agenda. How do we need to reconcile these things, right? Vijay had a somewhat optimistic experience when he's talking about nature and biodiversity and inculcating interests, he found that his experiences were positive. But it may not necessarily always be the case that that's not the only thing that people look at when they look at their neighborhood lakes or any common spaces, really, right? And Samya, I want to ask you, as your experience with Yelahanka Tenhali, you said you've been part of, there are 300 other residents who are with you and who support your work. How did that happen? Is it that you actively go out and as a lake group, then go out and try and garner support for your viewpoint with some, garner some kind of consensus? Is that what different lake groups should be doing? How do they do it, and do it in an ethical and honest way, which is something that is also important? How do different agencies that then have some power, like you have groups, like Ram Prasad pointed out, groups that get CSR funding, for example, but probably go about doing the work without a proper DPR, then how do we then fix that issue as well, without necessarily alienating all the people who are excited by the prospect of the work those groups are doing? So what is your experience then, and what do you think of this?
Yeah. So coming to your first question about how we get people involved in our, I would say that it's a long process. It's a tedious process, and it takes time to enroll people into what you feel is the right approach towards the whole conservation process. But the route that we took is we conducted a series of different programs Like I said, we have different groups with different interests. Some people are coming there to paint what they see. Some people are coming there to just observe and learn. And some people are coming there as part of their project work. And some people are coming there just to take a walk and enjoy nature. So we kind of try to cater to all these different types of people, just with the intention of sensitizing each one of them and kind of making them feel like a part of this larger community that was built around this lake. So we conducted, like Bijoy, we also conducted a lot of nature walks. And apart from that, we have these, for the more artistically inclined people, we thought we will have nature journaling where, you can combine art with what you see and, kind of take note and document it. So that is one thing we did. And for kids, we conducted a lot of different types of programs with, basic things like how to draw a bird day and things like that, different types of initiatives. And for other people who would like to watch and learn, we did have a lot of different surveys that we did, a tree survey or a dragonfly survey that we did along with WWF, and bird surveys and different things that people can actually get involved with. And lot of work went into getting the students involved, because we felt that they are the future of tomorrow. And if they kind of get sensitized, then it kind of becomes a part of their routine, and they kind of go around and talk about it more within their own circles, and it becomes a larger and larger community. So we work with a lot of educational institutes in and around Yelahanka and try to bring in, we do not discriminate whether they are PhD students or kindergarten students. We kind of welcome them all and kind of cater to them with different types of interactions that we plan around their age. And we've been lucky enough to have a group of naturalists and experts who kind of come in for all these programs and pitch in and share their knowledge and make it very interesting for the people to get involved. And that's where we've seen that a lot of people have started interacting and becoming, and we have a common WhatsApp group, in fact, where we only post things that are related to this particular lake. And we've had a lot of interaction, and it's very heartening. Like, it's very nice to see how they address this particular lake as our lake. So anything anyone puts up, they'll say, oh, was this at our lake? And that is something that has been really, really helpful. And it's rewarding to see that when you are able to instill this kind of ownership in each one of them. So that's what we've done. I'm sorry, I forgot the second part of the question.
I've always tried to pack multiple questions, but what you said, I really want to stress on that, because I think it's something both you and Bijoy have kind of pointed out. Again, with what Nirmala said, the empathy that is required to then engage with people from different backgrounds and to sensitize them about biodiversity or nature or but also, how do we go about doing the same thing for processes, for systems, for laws, which are unfortunately far more boring than birds and, Ram, please come in and whatever you had to say. And then let's also get some questions from the participants or audiences. There are some questions in the chat, as well as some people want to say things. We'll get to that as well. Please, Ram. You're on mute.
As Friends of Lakes, we have something known as LVD. That is what we call it as Lake Vision Document. We do this document with a participatory kind of a document, which is made before the lake rejuvenation happens. To be precise, this is supposed to be done before the lake rejuvenation. Yeah. And this we have taken it out from the Jala Samruddhi Yojana Sangha, JSYS program, which was run under the minor irrigation program, minor irrigation department, through a World Bank funding, where 1,800 Jala Samruddhi Yojana Sanghas were formed across Karnataka. And you should see that they used to call it as lake user group. and many groups are still existing. And there they would sit and the villagers would sit together, users would sit together and plan out how they want this lake to be. So that is what they used to call a lake vision document. So this lake vision document is something that we have a format, how we sit with all the people, including the fishermen, including if there is a cattle person who is taking the fodder from there, because one of the things is inclusivity. It cannot be that all the elites sit over there. I know of lakes wherein all the four sides are covered with apartments. They don't even allow other outside people to even come inside. That means the person who was a villager who was doing this, was going there inside and doing his grass cutting. And today some of the lake groups have been telling, no, elitist lake groups, who came now, who have come just 20 years back or 5 years back, are telling, no, he needs ID card to come inside and cut his grass and go.
Right.
This not done. Very simple.
Right.
It can be anybody, but not done. They have the first right. They have been here for 300 years, 400 years. They have been coming and doing. Inclusivity, major, first. So we see to it that everybody takes part in it, including the corporator if he is there. As usual, MLA doesn't come. So for Nalluralli was one of the first experiments we did, in wherein we got all the people around over there, including the villagers and including the the corporator also had come in, and then to envision as to how they want the lake to be. Whether do they want the whole lake to be a round circle where you'll go round and round? Do they want it that one portion of the lake will be totally ecological where no human being will go? We will let the birds only to be there. Whether will there be a central island? Will there not be a central island? And how they want this lake to be? How much of recreation space and how much of biodiversity space and other things? So making them understand to that extent that what are the different components that in a lake regeneration that has to come. And let me tell you the trade-offs that we do. Like the trade-off between how much of recreation should be there, how much of social activity should be there. The reason is, yes, in urban context we need social activity, because the moment you take out social activity from there, people are not coming and going. This lake will surely within no time will become very bad, because what is entering into this would be more of garbage, more of sewage. So to keep an eye over it, we will need people. Most of the lakes which are having good activity, where more than for 200, 300 people come on a daily walk and other things, the lakes are quite okay and well maintained. In sense of, when I tell maintained, is even the water quality may be little better than the other ones, but surely not in A category, B category, or C category. I would tell still they are in D and E category only, but at the same time they are in D category, tending more towards the C. So that's what we have seen. So to involve everybody, let it be a walker, let it be everybody, to do a lake vision document, which will be a vision document for next, maybe we are visioning for 2030 or we are visioning for 2040, and do the lake vision document, which when the team, actually to be precise, when the DPR is being prepared, it is the contract, the company which has been given the DPR preparation, they should be doing a consultation with the citizens. It is a chapter. It's a chapter in the DPR making. So you have to do that. So what do? They go and ask the MLA, or they'll go and ask the corporator. Corporator will show you a few people. They will interview them and they'll come back, and that ends the story. That's how, until now it has been happening. Here we are trying to bring a change, telling that we already have a document. Here is the LVD. Take the document and it is already there. What is the aspiration of this kind of people? And public announcements should be made that there is a lake vision document workshops are happening, and it will take time. Come and sit down and tell your things, or at least send somebody, or at least write a mail, or send a word with somebody that these are the things that they are looking at. So this is one thing we have been trying to do with many lakes, is to have a lake vision document, which end of the day you can hand it over to the next generation also, so that next generation understands why did I take this decision in the first place, and why I've been handing over a document like this. That is number one. Number two is lake health index, wherein we were very astonished when we went to more than 9 lakes were first, we interviewed more than 600 people around 9 lakes to know what do they see as a good lake. And for our astonishment, people were telling that beautiful park, nice Mexican grass, good trees around, and very nice, what are the trees are, that also, forget it. They all are, that ornamental trees. And apart from that one, then nobody was talking about water. So we have been having narratives, and let me tell you, this thing I tell, it is NGOs which took up this narrative, telling that They were sponsoring only all this kind of things, and NGOs came in with CSR funds telling that what they need to do is nothing to do with the core activity. So CSR funds were going only for this kind of activity. And the more and more the thing happened was, people also wanted it. And end of the day, what happened was the whole thing, if you see for years together, instead of looking at the water, all of them were looking at, the grass and the park and the gym and whether equipments are working properly. And these are the things that they were looking at. Nobody was asking when my lake is smelling. Especially, I'm telling you, Rachanelli lake was smelling, but the grass was very good. Now, today, if you ask me, Sankey tank, the E. coli is practically, the coliforms are practically 13,000 over there. But the lake is good. If you go and ask anybody in that, lake is one of the best lakes in Bangalore city. But
I will have to disagree with you there. I have spoken to many people who do, part of at least WhatsApp groups on Sankey Lake, and they do express a lot of anguish for how the walking path has been expanded, the jogging tracks have been added, the lake area has been reduced the way it has, and biodiversity has taken a hit in the lake. But they also have, there is again a lot of it comes back to the same thing that you have been saying, everybody has been saying, that different people have a different understanding of what lakes are. And I think what you said about having a common lake vision document and also doing interviews and discussions about what a lake should be, what is their idea of what a lake is I think it's a really interesting exercise, something maybe we should look at covering in Citizen Matters so that everybody gets a sense of what a lake vision document looks like.
So I would like to finish off.
Yeah.
So we have something known as Lake Health Index, which majorly talks about a few factors. That is, first we look at the physical or the visual factors. That is, how is the lake water color? What is, so we are given certain this thing. This is an app, and it is going to be on a website also. Maybe this whole thing is being done by Bangalore Sustainability Forum. There are small grants we had got, and with few students, with NID students and from university, Bangalore University students, we had put up this whole this thing that wherein you can actually go there and as a normal citizen can jot down whatever you are seeing over there. Certain weightages are given, and that will end of the day tell you what is the health of the lake, whether it is in the red zone, green zone, orange zone, or yellow zone. Which zone is the lake sitting now? Whether you are seeing the questions are like, what are you seeing around the lake? What is the color of the water? Or what are you seeing? What are any plants which is floating on the lake? These are the few questions. Like that, we have got biological questions, we have got limnological questions, we have got visual questions, that is visual physical parameters, and then we have got some chemistry also. The chemistry is to do some certain test with the sensors. So like that, we have done few lake health index, which is a very citizen science program. It has nothing to do with heavy scientific lab test kind of a thing, but it can give a general idea as to where the lake is moving forward to. That is, whether it is moving towards the green zone or to the yellow zone, or it is moving towards the orange zone or to the red zone. So this can give a kind of picture, which is again another initiative that we are looking at, wherein lake groups and citizens can start interacting with water rather than just interacting only with the peripherals of the lakes. And one more thing, whether there is space, where should be the space for park? This question has been asked to me many a times, and I'm very clear on that one. The space is known as CA areas. Every layout, when it is made, every time when you do something, there is a 15% which is so known as civic community areas. And out of the civic community areas, whichever we have done the survey, 73% of the civic areas has been gobbled up and they are buildings.
Yeah.
So we have lost. This is the land wherein you are supposed to have your school. This is the land where you are supposed to have your park. This is the land where you are supposed to have your playground. This is the area where you are supposed to relax. No, that area we don't even know. When I'm coming to a layout or I'm coming to a big apartment also, they are supposed to give you that 15% area. That also we don't think that, where is my 15%? That also we don't see. At the end of the day, then we tell, oh, I want a place in the lake. First of all, when you are not looking at your own layouts, where is your CA area? What is the damn thing that they want to come and do it inside the lake over here? Lakes are not meant for parks. Okay, if you want to do anything, still there is something known as the buffer zone. Do whatever you want in the buffer zone, but surely not inside the lake areas. Lake is sacrosanct and it cannot be given away for something else, because lakes are flood mitigation zones. And today we will lose properties if we don't give that respect to the lake, that it is a flood mitigation zone, and we need to really look at rejuvenation of the lake in perspective of flood mitigation zones as flood mitigation zones also. If we don't do this, 100% there will be more and more flooding, and people will have to run away from here, not due to less of water, but because of more of water and flooding every now and then.
Okay, I'm going to, yeah, thanks for that. We're going to go to, we had a couple of comments. I'm sure you've been seeing some of the things in the chat. Satyavani has been asking questions about how she can deal with encroachment of Rajakallis in Vibhutipura Lake. She's also had a lot of questions, procedural questions. Who has the who knows about the money allotted? How do we find out these things? All of which, Satyani, is just, I think everybody will agree, it's just symptomatic of the problem that we don't know these things. I have no easy website that I can share with you where you can find out how much money is allotted to Vibhutipura Lake. Where we do, I just want to say, wherever possible, Citizen Matters, we do try and gather this data, we publish it as a story, or we have a data partner, our data team, Open City, where we also put up this information when we find it. So there is a list right now of lakes that have 67 lakes for which development has been approved under Navanagaratna scheme and Amrutanagaratna scheme. Those documents are available on Open City, and you can go there and you can actually see whether Vibhutipura Lake is one of them and how much money there is. I will put up the link in the chat for you for Open City, or if anyone else who's interested. There are also other questions about how can we come together and form a common way forward for lakes in Bangalore district by Balappa Raj, who's been following us on YouTube live stream. I hope that some of this conversation, Balappa, has helped you, because some of the things, for example, that we take the trouble to communicate with different citizens and talk about what their wants are and whether the lake is the right place for those for their needs, whether it's a park or a walking track, where are the places where those things need to be done, whether we can communicate those things, whether we can communicate the importance of biodiversity, whether we can inculcate a love for wildlife, for nature. All of these things would help and I think there's a lot we have learned from Ram's idea of this lake vision document, something that I think we should all explore further. And maybe at Citizen Matters, we can also try and see if we can write about this a little more. Okay, Jyotika Mandal has her hand up, so you can ask your question very briefly, because we're not supposed to actually ask.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you to all of you. You know, I got so much of knowledge from all of you. Thank you for that. So I stay near Madiwala Lake. Okay, and I have been watching that near the lake there are been tankers. You know, that is so many of houses they have installed these bore wells. Huge tankers come there, and then when I found it out, it was of the political leader of this local area. So how do I go about it? That tankers, how far the tankers can be, filling stations can be from the lake area, because it is just not even 30 meters away from the lake.
I mean, this is a problem at many lakes, right? Even recently, I think Solkeri, there was some digging of a borewell. There are tankers across lakes in Bangalore where this is happening.
Yes.
Part of the problem, again,
So I'll answer that this thing.
Please.
Jyotika ma'am, there is no such law that where should the only law that is there with regarding to commercial usage of a borewell is that it should be at least 300 meters away from 300 to 500 meters away from a public borewell. Means that borewell is supplying water to the whole area. From there, they need to be far away. And I think so it is only 50 meters far away, not more than that. That is the only law that is existing. And one more thing is this particular person one who is doing the commercial activity of selling water should have taken all the required licenses. Other than this, there is no this thing telling that, from the lake, where should the borewell be. But one more thing, 30 meters from the borewell is a no construction zone. So that is another thing that is there, 30 meters from the lake boundary. Again, I'm telling you 30 meters from the lake boundary, not the water area, not all those kind of things. It is the revenue boundary of 30 meters from the lake is a buffer zone. And within the buffer zone, it is a no construction area. This is as per the KTCDA Act section 10. So according to that one, that is what it is, that you cannot do any this kind of activity within the 30-meter zone. If it is within the 30-meter zone, then you can always, if it is going to be a small construction or all those kind of things, then we can always report that, telling that this was within 30 meters. But again, I'll tell you, if it is going to be like that, and but luckily this law has been there for a pretty long time. So when this things was brought to the court notice, especially in the Supreme Court, our commissioner at that time, Manjunath Prasad, told that if you implement this law, half of Bangalore I need to break apart. So that is what end of the day it was told, and we have landed up in a situation wherein we really cannot do anything about this, to be precise. But only thing is, with regarding to Madiwala, as of yesterday and day for yesterday, and the amount of sewage that is directly flowing into the lake, I am very sure that lake water will go into the ground, and this person will start getting sewage water directly. So after that one, whoever drinks it will start dying. And when the few deaths happen, this will automatically stop. Don't take me, when I'm being blunt like this, please don't take it, because people don't understand until their stomach becomes something. Only then they start understanding. So people have to be really be careful when they are, from where the water is coming and from where this thing is coming. They have to spend some time understanding all this kind of. Or else this will be very difficult. One among the heavily polluted lakes in the city is Madiwala, and yesterday though all the sewage has been directly flowing into this lake, and because of that one, the groundwater will get contaminated. Already it is contaminated, and this will create other problems. That only will stop all this kind of activities. But rest, this is the law that we have.
Okay, I'm on that note. We've gone way above our usual time. But on that note, I really want to get all the panelists in for one last comment on what's the way forward. One thing that you think needs to happen, and ideally, I'd like you to give us your feedback on what the media, what journalists like me, what is our role? Because clearly one of the common themes is that people do not know enough. We do not have enough information, first of all, about how things are supposed to be, before we even get to what is lacking from the government side in terms of information sharing. So I would love to hear from all of you very briefly about what you think we should be doing. One thing. Yeah.
Banu, sorry, I've been asked to vacate the premises. People are waiting, so I have to really get off now. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry.
Yes, I booked the room till 7:30, so they're all standing in line.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for joining us, Nirmal.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. So maybe Samya, since I can see you closest, maybe you could start. What is the one thing you think we should do? Then we'll go on to.
Yeah, one thing is, I think we need to look at lake conservation as a holistic approach, where you think about the Rajakalways that are leading to the lake, as well as, the upstream and the downstream. That is, when you look at one lake conservation, you need to consider all this. That is one thing. And you also need to make sure that you have a citizen group that is going to take ownership of this whole process, so that, we can sensitize all of them around with their help, and make them understand what it is exactly that we are trying to do, and how a lake is different from a park. That is something that has to be, put forward to all of them, because we constantly get, like Mr. Ramprasad was also saying, that we have people who will ask for a park, a gym, and a concreted structure or something. So that is something we'll have to look at. I feel that is the right approach, but citizen involvement and engagement would be the key as well.
Okay, Bijoy, one thing you think is absolutely.
Yeah, I think the core conversation should be about water, and especially in Bengaluru, in places like this, where uh, we take our water for granted, despite the fact that we have to work very hard to get this water. In an apartment, to give you an example of the apartment where I stay, I've been staying here for close to 17, 18 years now, and we still don't have piped water, Kaveri water. And of course, the demand for water is there. There were tankers. I mean, we fought a long battle to get our groundwater recharged, etc. The onus seems to be here on citizens and on RWAs to make sure that water is provided to the people. Now, this is a fundamental point where that people need to question. When we have lakes that can potentially, I mean, there was a time when that water was used for drinking, where the livestock used to drink it, people used to drink it. Even today, we don't know where the water from the Madhwala borewell, it could be from the same aquifer, the same ground source. But on the surface, I think the question begins with water, because that is what everyone can see. And I mean, everything else is peripherals, birds or whatever it is. These are peripherals. The question should begin with water. And I think that is a point of unification. And then, of course, the one other thing, I'm sorry, Banu, I will say this, is that, today, and this is an answer to what journalists and should be doing. I think there is a limited coverage, except from, say, platforms like Citizen Matters and others, that really focus on local issues. I mean, we tend to think of local as secondary. And I think that needs to change, that it's as good as what's happening at the center and what's happening on the global stage. The local issue needs to be prime focus for us. And once that shift comes in, and I'm hoping it will, if we make these points strongly enough, I think then we will start looking for our issues rather than throwing our hands up helplessly.
Okay, that's a really good point about more coverage of local issues. Ram, what would you like to say? The final word.
With regarding to, especially, I will stick only to the, see what happens when you bring people like us who have been working for decades. Is the problem is we have too much to tell. And so short time has been missing. Okay, the main thing is for us journalists, first of all, when the articles are written, many articles, when I read it in newspaper, I feel very bad. Me myself being in the journalism for quite some time, and when I read the article, this phone call article is something that I practically I've been forcing the interns who come under journalism to never do it, but go see the lake and come back. So the thing is that a writer has to write it what they feel. No, we need that kind of an reaction from the side of the reader. And what we are seeing is many of them are just just one dump of information which is not even properly structured, and we see that it doesn't make any sense. So that has to come out. That is, the article has to make sense. Number one, this is on the one side, if it is. Number two is that as journalists, when they are looking at an issue and when they are trying to do, and when they are trying to interview people and trying to put up an article or trying to tell that, how they can become totally being part of a solution over here, then they will have to spend some time in understanding the whole thing. Half-hearted understanding will not work over here. Spending some time, putting that time to really understand the whole thing and then making an article out of it surely will have a lot of impact in terms of readers, and having a forum where readers also can take answers from they ask question and there are experts to answer this kind of question. There is no question that cannot be answered. So there are experts who will answer the question, whatever it is. So this kind of thing also should be there. And what I told you, Lake Health Index, maybe citizens and Lake vision document. So Lake Health Index, I'm telling, because this is the tool is available for everybody. It's a free tool, free app available for everyone out over there. So they can just keep on doing Lake Health Index, across different lakes, not once or twice, but at least in 20 places within the lake, and each person can do it. So the more the number of this thing that we get, we understand what the lake is happening. And there is where the journalists or the news channels or newspaper can bring people together over there, telling that keep on doing this. And when people meet for such things, automatically they will start talking to each other, and they'll find, okay, it is not just me alone who is interested, there are 4 more interested, and slowly the team will form. And again, I'm telling you, it doesn't need that we need big organization, it should be registered, there should be money, because Friends of Lakes is nothing like that. It is just a movement. It is a movement to save lakes. We are not even registered, but we are there, and we are one among the very, very solid voice when it comes to lake rejuvenation or to lake conservation and protection. We have been there around, and it is possible. We have shown it from the past 13-14 years that it is possible. So which we should continue to encourage people and tell that there are different ways of doing things. Informal groups are there, formal groups are there, both are there, and both are doing well in their own ways of trying to tackle this issue.
Thank you so much. Thanks all. I think what I'm hearing from all your final remarks is well as the entire conversation is much more communication is needed. We need to educate people much more about everything from the rules and laws to what lakes are supposed to be, what is their original purpose and what they do for the city. And it's good because we're a communication organization, so that's one thing we can do. So thank you so much for
one last thing I want to just suggest. If possible, every lake's functionality and purpose, if it can be redefined properly as per the present situation, including hydrogeology and other things. I'll tell you again, the purpose and the functionality of lake is different for each and every lake, and that we need to be very sure that this purpose and functionality with experts, with citizens, with everybody is put forward to the government, so that we are very sure that even if each lake has got its own series of articles telling that this particular lake was, these are the parameters and this is the way this lake should be, because of the ABCD factors that are involved over there, will be a very, very good thing that, if somebody can take it and push it forward to look at the present purpose and functionality for the next 20 years or 30 years. So looking at that timeline to look at how we can take this one forward.
Okay, that's a great suggestion. We'll definitely think about this and see how we can do something like this. So anyway, thank you so much. I won't keep you all any longer. Thanks for joining us. And we'll keep having this conversation periodically because we need to have more discussions about this. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Bhanu.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you so much, Bhanu. Thank you, Soumya, Prasad sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ram.
Thank you. Thank you, Meera. Thank you, Shravasti. Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in. And let's continue the conversation. It's important that all of us, I think, are able to not speak separately, but together as well.
Together as a voice.
Thank you for facilitating this conversation.
Yes, thanks. Bye.
Bye.